by Crimson Cult Media.
We got you now.
No turning back.
Welcome to Moths to the Flame. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, my morbid mothlings. Another exciting podcast episode today. And I know every single guest I have, I always say, I'm so excited. I'm dying. I'm so excited. But like when I say I am so excited today to have Polly Hall with us on Moths to the Flame, y'all, like I am fangirling. Polly is infamous in one of my stronghold right squad writing groups that we've been together for like 5 years. And Taxidermist Lover, after I read that book, we have forever called it, because I of course had to describe it to them. We have forever called it the Horse Corpse Popsicle book. So I cannot wait to talk about this and your most recent release. Thank you for joining us on the podcast today, Polly.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I don't think I've ever been fangirled. I'm not sure I have. Maybe like online, but not face to face.
Listen, I really try.
I love it.
It is so fun. It's so fun. And I even, I like to collect taxidermy. I include taxidermy writing in some of my stories. And sometimes I'm like, am I pushing this too far? And then I'm like, no, Polly Hall went way beyond. I'm good. Like, I'm way good.
I don't think I did. Like I've read other.
So funny. So funny.
Like, since then, and I'm like, no, I need to go further.
Always okay in my book for sure. So I'm going to let the readers and listeners of the podcast know who you are, because here I am talking like they should already know. I will let them know if they have not read Taxidermist Lover or Myrrh, they need to. So Polly is an author, poet, and artist. Her second psychological horror novel, Myrrh, is now out with Titan Books. Whoop, whoop. Her debut novel, The Taxidermist Lover, was featured in the New York Times, a finalist in the Bram Stoker Awards, and won gold at the Ippy Awards. Woohoo! Which that's how I found out about the book in the first place, because I was reading all of the finalists. I wanted to see, I just wanted to know who they were. And after I read it, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I love it. Love it. So they have had writing published in various anthologies, including Free Loves on Friday, and commissioned as part of interdisciplinary arts projects. They hold an MA in creative writing and PGCE. They live next to a cider factory in Somerset, England, with a cat named Vishnu. So very, very exciting. Thank you for joining us. So let's just dive right in. I want to know where the writing journey for you began. Have you always been into writing? Did you always know it was going to be horror? Where did it start?
I think it started when I was in the Brownies. I don't know if you have the Brownies over there. Like kind of Girl Scouts or something that.
Girl Scouts, yeah.
And I was, and so you earn badges, by doing things, and then you get to like sew them on your arm. And I did my writer's badge, and I wrote a story called The Granny's Gang, which is like very 1980s, un-PC, and I had like really weird names. And they were like these bunch of old ladies that lived in I called it an old people's home, but you don't call it that anymore, a care home. And they bust out and they just went on a massive adventure and caused chaos. So I got my writer's badge, and I also got a box of Maltesers. So I got chocolate. I got paid in chocolate.
That's obviously a win right there.
And
Like, I love that. That sounds
I
like
thought, chocolate, yeah, if you can write things and get paid in chocolate, then that's me. So that was the
yeah.
very, very beginning, aged 9, I think, or 10. Then kind of joined writing groups, didn't really take it that seriously because I thought it was so far removed from me, from my experience, to have anything traditionally published. It was like a pipe dream. And I just used to write things in, notebooks, hundreds of notebooks, do writing exercises, join writing groups. And then in 2014, I went back to uni and did an MA in creative writing. And that was when I thought, oh, it might actually be a real book, might actually get a real book published. And then that's where I wrote The Taxidermist Lover. So really, it's fairly recent that I got published. I had articles and stories and poems published, but normally as part of an anthology. So that was my first book that came out in the lockdown period, and so that was a different publisher with Camcat, American publisher. And then fast forward to now, to April, and Titan published my second novel, Mer. So really, it's kind of like there's a long period, but I was kind of always writing. It's just it wasn't always out there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it was the steps you needed to take in order to get to where you wanted to go. And how awesome to start with Camcat and then your second book coming out from Titan. Like, that's amazing. That's awesome. Congratulations for that. So did you go through, I have to know, did you go through the querying process with Taxidermist Lover? Like, I would love to know how you pitched that to anyone, to a literary agent or to a publisher.
It got pitched to a lot of agents and a lot of publishers. It was rejected a lot, and because it was kind of cross genre, it was sort of gothic, it was sort of horror, it was sort of literary. No one really knew how to deal with it because it was like a hybrid. It's just a mixture of original writing, and I think it was difficult for people to play. The feedback was consistent that it was good writing, but they didn't quite know how the story could be marketed or pitched to the public, which really annoys me because I just think it's a story. Just they have to put things in boxes. But I was really happy, like when Camcat, I found them through a pitch. It was like a Pit Mad or Pit, on Twitter. X, well, Twitter then.
Whatever.
Whatever.
It'll always be Twitter. Like,
yeah. So, so that was sort of like the contact was through somebody else I knew who'd been published by another publisher, and they told me there was this Pit Mad, and then I pitched it, and they said, "We really like it. You've got fans, but we don't really see how it's going to fit with our list." So I was like, "Oh, boo-hoo!" Back to the drawing board. And then something else came up where they sort of aggressively bought a lot of different imprints, and they were actively looking for like sci-fi, horror, genre fiction, and they said, yeah, send it in again. So that's how it's really like through perseverance, I guess.
yes,
persistent badgering, but like knocking on people's doors.
That's the publishing game,
right? That's the moral of the story.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people have a misconception that writing and publishing and putting out a book, it's like you write the book, you send it off, and yay. And it's like, no, it is a grueling test of perseverance for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's really like a lot of people, I guess, are amazing writers, but they get really jaded, or they get sort of knocked back so many times. They think, oh, it's not worth anything, or I'm not gonna pursue this anymore. But I would say to people who have written something and they really want to get it published, just keep persevering, because there's plenty of publishers out there. There's books being produced every day, and why not yours? Why not your story? So that's basically my message of perseverance. And I was lucky that some like took me on and then marketed it as a horror. They were like, Polly, it's horror, and I was like, oh, is it? So I kind of came out as a horror author, which is great.
I cannot believe you're. Oh, it is it horror?
I don't know. It's like gothic. I don't even know what it is. Like,
oh, it's so
it's
absurd, and I just
shock
love it.
and shock and awe,
Yeah.
body horror.
Very much so. So I also want to comment on, I mean, it's very evident in Taxidermist Lover that you are a poet too, because you have such a lyrical style of writing. And I really lean into, I love to write that way. I love to read that way. Like it's just, I soak it up into my soul. I love it. But I also feel like the constant stream of consciousness type of writing that you had for your main character there, it was just like, the long haul throughout the whole book. And I really feel like it was a test of perseverance too, to just keep reading. And it was an interesting style. And I remember as I was reading it, I was telling my husband, also a writer and prolific reader, and I'm like, this book is interesting. This is wild. And even today, when I said, guess who I'm interviewing on the podcast today? And I told him, he was like, oh my God, that's one of your favorites. I'm like, yes, it's so unique. So talk to me about how you went with that type of narrative style. I feel like it feels like the most natural for your character and for all of the experience that they have together. But was that a conscious choice, or did you just sit down and start writing? Did you plot that out? How did that come to be?
So the Taxidermist Lover was that, if that's the one you're referring to, that was that started off as a short story that was for a specific event when I was studying the MA, and we had to write a piece that could be read to an audience. And I wasn't really that confident with the manuscript I was working on at the time, so I just quickly scribbled a new story that started off with the line, like with the beginning line, where Scarlett, the narrator, who is the taxidermist lover, is addressing him and saying, you're a complex fucked up mess, you said to me, and then it went from there. And then I had already had the idea of putting in hybrid taxidermy animals that had been kind of had their souls trapped within the taxidermy. So that idea was there. And then when I read it out, I thought, oh, it's just a story that'll just go on back in the drawer. Loads of people came up and said, oh, I really like your story. You should continue your story. So I switched my manuscript and ended up writing a novel. So that's how it sort of progressed. And it had a lot of editing because we worked on it in class. So a lot of the writing was like churned out and then hacked to pieces and, ripped apart, put back together. And then it went through the whole editing process with the editor at CamCat. So really, I always wanted to write it in second person because I'd only read a few novels written entirely in second person, and it really speaks to me, the narrator talking directly to the other, whether it's the reader or to another. So kind of in the Taxidermist Lover, Scarlett is talking to Henry Pepper, who's her husband, and the taxidermist, and almost it's like you're witnessing that, but you are also on the receiving end of, like you said, her stream of consciousness. So you're really to her. My thing keeps going off. Is it all right? It keeps.
Yeah,
I don't know if you can still.
I'm not seeing anything. I can see you.
Oh, you can still hear me. Yeah.
I can hear you.
Okay,
You're good.
cool.
Yeah. So
Cool. Yeah.
I think that's so interesting because it like I love reading the entire script, not script, but in that second person POV, I feel so intimately connected to the characters and to the story, and it almost adds a sense of creeping dread into the whole narrative.
Mhm.
Like I just think it's so fascinating. I notice in your work is compared to that of Eric LaRocca and Catriona Ward, which I feel like exactly hits it on the money. It has that same sort of ethereal, like creeping, uncomfortable quality that kind of just makes you feel so deeply with the characters. So did you go for second person with Myrrh as well? Or tell me about how that one came to be.
So I kind of well, no. So Myrrh is written from different women's viewpoints. So the main character is Myrrh, obviously, and so that's written as third person. But KN I've written as first person because I really wanted the reader to get inside her head. She was to me, she's kind of like the most sort of complicated character, because you're sort of trying to work out what's her connection, like all the way through to Myrrh. And she's sort of like the traditional, or they're both really unreliable narrators, and you've got like the goblin that's interjecting into Myrrh's consciousness. It's always kind of inside her. But it's mostly women characters and a few sort of extras who are related to Myrrh's adoption story. So I wanted it to be fractured and I wanted it to be disjointed because I wanted like kind of validation from care experienced people who would read it and think that really, really resonates with me. Anyone that's been through like the care system, the whole like feeling invisible or not feeling good enough, and you could say they're like universal themes for people as they grow and learn, or just be as a human being. But
Right.
there's quite specific traits of adoptees, and I'm an adoptee, so I have always written kind of from that perspective. And I wanted the main character to be the story, to be her search for her birth relatives, because that's such a huge thing in someone who's been adopted. It's to find out where they've come from, and the not knowing is almost like a gap in their story. So yeah, so that was the idea behind Myrrh.
Which is so fascinating. And I love that you mention your own experience with adoption, because I feel like in your writing, you're so character centric. I mean, you have really beautifully fleshed out characters that you feel like you know them, and so I think that's fascinating to talk about that journey and to bring awareness to people that maybe haven't had that experience. I have a unique experience with that. I grew up with my mom and my dad, and then because of 23andMe, found out that my dad, who is my dad, is not biologically my father. So then now I have a whole other father that I've met, which is super exciting and wonderful. And I have another sibling that I didn't know about. But like, because of technology, I feel like people are able to make those connections where in the past, it was a lot harder for them to find each other. So That's very,
Yeah,
very,
definitely. Yeah, I
very
think
cool.
I think you're right. The whole opening up of DNA testing and like putting it online is an ancestry.com and things like that. You can find out very quickly connections with people you're biologically related to, which is always like a weird one, kind of, because obviously, like you said, you grew up with your dad, and I grew up with mum and dad, who I call mum and dad, but then
Right.
you've got this whole other parent sort of ancestral line that you're wondering about, and you want to know because everybody goes, oh, you look different to them, or like
Yep.
people will try and match up like features, or they'll look at me and look at my parents and try and work out which bit of them are they like, inherited if they didn't know we're not biologically related. So
Right.
it's impacts your everyday life, but it's also quite hidden. It's something sort of quite secret. It's something that is not talked about very often unless you're being sort of intimate with someone, or you're like a complete oversharer like I am.
Same.
So, yeah, so like you wouldn't know those things. It's like the hidden parts of someone, and also like the complexity of women also, with their layers of history and layers of kind of having to deal with being a woman is also added to the mix there. So there's so many psychological complex elements in it that I wanted to show how that impacted the characters, and how, like, when you're trying to live but you're also trying to find out parts about your life that you don't even know where to start. So that's really what I wanted Mer to reflect, and for people to reflect on as well.
Yeah, very thought provoking. I like that. I like that a lot. And again, you have such that intricate closeness with your characters. So I wonder, you talk about the historical experiences of women too. How much would you say that you have to research for both the taxidermist lover, and unless you're a taxidermist by trade? I can't, I'm assuming you probably had to do some research on that process, and then for Mur as well. How extensive of research do you find that you have to do for your writing?
So with the taxidermist lover, I actually visited a traditional taxidermist, and asked him lots of questions about how he would stuff certain animals, or prepare them, or in some cases dispatch them. So he would actually he was actually a hunter as well. Like, so he would, over here it's mostly deer species that get sort of culled, because they're actually, there's nothing above them in the food chain here, so they do actually get
I
culled.
didn't
So there's
realize
lots, I
that.
think it's like 5 different deer species, because we don't have bears and wolves anymore in England, in the UK. So
Really?
yeah, so they don't have natural predators. So there's actually a lot of deer running around all over. If you think how
I did
tiny
not
like the
know
British
that.
Isles is. Did you know that we used to have bears and wolves, but they kind of all got extinct.
Huh.
So so a lot of the deer species. So there's kind of like, taxidermy also has had a bit of a resurgence with art, and there are some sort of notable artists that use taxidermy in their work. And I was looking at the hybrid taxidermy, which is where they mix one or more, 2 or more different species and stitch them together. And there was a German artist that I contacted, who very kindly sent me his entire oeuvre of like art, and only a part of it was these hybrid creatures, um,
Wow.
which are amazing. Like I had little postcards of them. I'm not sure. I think I've given a lot of them away now. Um, and I also grew up in the countryside, so it was kind of, it wasn't so shocking for me to see taxidermy because I would be around it a lot.
Mhm.
Deer heads, skulls, there'd be dead things along the side of the road, badgers and foxes and rabbits. So the whole like kind of association with death, and the fact that taxidermy somehow immortalizes them was not a new subject to me. And then so going on to myrrh, the research for that was sort of fairly close to home research based with my own experience of adoption, so the themes and the traits. And I looked up, I was sort of researching characters, women characters. I tend to be drawn to sort of complicated women characters who have some sort of need to find out something else. You know, they're searching for something. So that sort of questing essence, and also a darkness. So some sort of like element of darkness, which is where the horror comes in. So like the mucky bits, you know, like the bits that you don't normally see of a human, the bits where
Yes.
people try and hide it. I mean, they come out like in social media, they come out very, very clearly and very, very graphically. And I'm quite interested in that now. Sort of, I'm researching that now, and there's so much content online, and it's so instant, and it's there, kind of imprinted in front of you. You could literally write a couple of novels a day if you transcribed one thread of, couldn't
Yes.
you? Like, I'm just, you know, I might actually do that, like a whole like
That would be
Facebook
really
kind of
cool.
thread.
Well, and I think
And I
it
think,
shows the difference in people, that how they communicate differently in that virtual space versus face to face, you know, the keyboard warrior or whatever, but it like lowers the inhibitions, and so people are able to let that dark stuff kind of squeak out, and like unintentionally, which I think that's a whole fascinating concept in and of itself.
it is, it's quite, it's also like trying to discern which of it is real and which of it is not, because then we're kind of like on the precipice of trying to understand AI, and AI is kind of learning from our interaction with technology. And I'm quite interested in that, and I'm not like kind of anti AI. I obviously write everything by pen and pencil. I'm
Right.
not like using I'm kind of against AI writing great literature, because I really don't see how that can happen if it doesn't have a soul.
That
That's
human,
a whole
yeah,
yeah, that's like a whole other
that's a whole podcast, yeah.
conversation. That's a whole podcast. But and there's that, I keep getting emails from like different writing associations asking about like doing surveys on what is your opinion on AI generated text. And
Mm.
I mean, I'm kind of, at the moment, I'm still trying to understand it, but I also think that poetry and fiction is in the realm of the soul. So does AI have a soul? So that's a question, you know.
Right.
Do and that, like you say, it was a whole other podcast.
Yeah, yeah, because then it's like it gets into, can it mimic a soul? And you talk about horror. There's a lot of horror information there. I feel like there's
Yeah,
meat
there is.
to the story for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know Eric LaRocca writes, he uses he's very interesting kind of format when he writes. So he will do email like transcripts. Like one of his story was like in a chat room, and so it was like the interaction between people in a chat room. I just love that sort of really original type of format. So yeah, he really inspires me because he does things that I think, oh, that's sort of given me permission to think, actually, I can write like that. I can write, sort of in a weird way. Just because it hasn't been done before, it doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah. And he does it so unapologetically too. I love Eric. He's such a sweetheart. I don't know if you've ever met him in person yet.
I haven't. We've interacted obviously on social media, and he was really kind to put like the cover blurb on Mer, which I'm like, oh my God, I'm so chuffed. But I haven't been like, I'd like to come over to the States and do like stuff over there, because I just love like the enthusiasm I get from the audience in the States. I mean, and in the UK, but generally like you're kind of more advanced in sort of horror. You don't shy away from the word horror. Like it was only really called horror here recently. It used to be like psychological thriller, or do you know what I mean? Like they wouldn't use the word horror.
Right. Even to
I think they do now. Titan do, like Titan are great. They're like the home of horror. So
yes. Well, and I think that hopefully in the next couple of years, years away, not anytime soon, but I think they're talking about trying to do an author con over in the UK. And I think that would be so much fun. And we can all just come over there and meet everyone that we wanted to meet. It would be so fun. I would really love that. And that's amazing. Fun author event for sure. So and I think with horror, you bring up an interesting point about how it is changing into more, I don't want to say mainstream, but really mainstream, thinking about like these shows on Netflix and streaming services like Squid Games. And I think about like the explosiveness of Game of Thrones, for instance, that's fantasy, but there was a lot of horror elements in it too, that the general public en masse were really accepting of and okay with. And I think we are seeing a shift in horror becoming a little more, we're always pushing that boundary and pushing the edge, to go even further. But where do you see horror continuing to go? How do you see it changing in the future?
Oh, I think it's like, because it's been sort of redefined, hasn't it? And it's still like, there's still subgenres coming out, obviously, like with queer horror, which wasn't like 10 years ago, there wasn't such a thing. And I want adoption horror. Maybe that's like one that you can add to the list. Or very, very niche. Yeah. But so in the future, I think, like you say, it's becoming mainstream. It's becoming a book you can select when you go into a supermarket, even, or what you call them, like, or somewhere where it's on the main shelves rather than tucked around the corner on a little kind of shelf of its own. So, and actually, it's only recently I've noticed. Yeah, I've noticed they do actually have, in bookstores, they have a horror section, whereas before it would kind of be lumped in with sci-fi or fantasy. It wouldn't like have its own shelf. But I think also there's like the blending. Like I've had reviews saying, is this horror? This isn't horror. This isn't what I expected. But I kind of think, well, pick a book and read it for what it is, not for what you think it's going to be.
Right.
And there's this expectation, isn't it, that horror meets the need of what you expect, like the last horror you read, or what your kind of your flavor of horror is. Like some people like extreme gore, some people like psychological, some people like I don't know, like slasher. Some people like, I don't know,
Paranormal and yeah.
paranormal horror. Yeah, it's like there's so many different like nuances that it's yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what is happening, but I do think there's a great need for horror writing in this world at the moment, because horror writers go there and they present something, and there might be the argument that you say, oh, there's too much awful things happening in the world, there's too much real horror. But the whole point of that is that you're turning it into an art form, and you're presenting it in a way that can be digested, and in a way that's escapism, the same as you would read a romance novel, you know, like not everybody's got a great romance going on in their lives, so it's like, I don't know, it's probably a bad example, but fairy tales, I mean, look at them.
Yeah, it is that escapism, but it also provides that safe environment to work through those issues. You know, like I think of grief horror, and how, you know, there are like with spirits of people that have gone on, and there's just all these ways to deal with traumatic issues that people have experienced, but through literature in a safe way. So I absolutely think, I mean, it's the forefront of literature in that. And I think there hopefully is a little bit of a shift with you know, not just being that, oh, it's genre fiction. So there's still areas where they're not saying horror, they won't include horror, they'll just say, oh, genre fiction. And I'm like, come on, you know, this is one of the most popular, if not the most popular genre of all time, because campfire stories and the origin of storytelling a lot of times included scary bits. So who was there first? You know, literary fiction,
look at, like,
or horror?
Yeah. Like, fairy tales were never meant to be children's stories. They were told as a kind of like around the campfire, around the fire, you know, in the little villages at night, to give you kind of a moral compass or something that would warn you or help you as you grew or as you worked as a community. You know, they're not fluffy. They've been made into like fluffy Disney, but actually fairy tales are the most scary stories if you delve into them. There's like body parts being chopped off. There's children being shoved in cages. There's wolves eating people. You know, it's like, that's horror. So
it's very much
it's like,
I love all of the original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tales, and I actually
like
have
the
an
Grimm's,
anthology coming out later this month that we've put together. We're calling it Fairy Tale Fuckery, and we're trying to take it kind of back to some of that, like, listen, fairy tales are gruesome. They are into, I mean, the Little Mermaid ends up becoming sea foam. Like, she doesn't marry the little prince at 16, and you know, like, it's crazy. So I feel like
and I think they chop Cinderella's foot off, like it one, like, you know, like when they're going around like the glass slipper, and they're like, don't they just chop her foot off at one point in the original?
The stepsisters do. They chop their toes off to try to fit
in
the shoe.
They chop.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, look, my foot fits. No big deal, guys. It's okay. And like, there's no happy ending for any of them, because, you know, like Pinocchio, they made horrible choices. So if they're gonna, you know, it's really fascinating how it become Disney-fied. I could have a whole thesis on the hoodoo of, you know, like how we're all told these fluffy stories, and it totally diminished the original literature there. So
I think Shrek kind of like sort of blew that out of the water, didn't it?
Yes. So I want to know how you feel like with writing and with this, taking it to the next level and taking it farther than it, you know, and bringing it back to some of that OG fairy tale type stuff, because I do feel like there's kind of that little thread in your writing as well, with the goblins and with the swans and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. What do you find to be the most difficult aspect of writing horror?
I think there's like this need to sort of absorb what has gone before, and also to know your stuff. And I always feel like such an amateur and an imposter when I speak to people who've been writing for years, or they've been studying horror, or they're readers of horror and they're like real experts in it. And I feel like painfully like uneducated on certain subjects. And then I think, well, I write what I write, and I think I do read quite a lot, but I read widely. I don't just read horror. I read all sorts of different fiction and things that are recommended to me, in poetry and non-fiction. And I think if you do that, you'll it'll flavor kind of what you're writing as well. But it's yeah, so my editor on Mer kept saying, you need to be more, you need to go further, you need to just unleash more horror. And I was thinking, I was like, not holding back, but like having that permission from an editor to say, just do it, just be more horror. And I still think I probably could have gone a bit further with Mer, but I didn't. But we did cut a lot out and then rewrite a lot on Mer from the original, and made the goblin more prominent. And then I had like the idea of, so there was sort of mythology and folklore associated with the goblin as well, because there's sort of like the Cornish link, and there's a lot of mythology with sort of the southwest of England, and so that was put in there as well, like references to it that people would sort of do. I don't have to know that. I think with my one, and it's got body horror in it because it's all part of a story. It's like an old story that I'm retelling. That's all I'm going to say. It's like
Okay, I cannot wait.
It's like an old medieval kind of references, but also it's contemporary. So I'm going to say it's eco horror. It's referencing like humans' interaction with nature. And I'm kind of, I guess Taxidermist Lover was eco as well, because it's looking at nature and human animal
interactions,
interaction, and and or crossover hybrids, and evolution, all that sort of stuff. So I'm very, very interested at the moment with what's going on in the world, climate change, massive disruption to our natural planet, and that is something I think that is emerging in horror fiction. There's a lot of references in I've just read Lindy Ryan's new novella that's come out, Cold Snap, that's set in Alaska. And Tim Leben, he writes eco horror, and that's sort of like the frozen landscapes and things where things have melted and unleashed millions of years old viruses, that kind of thing. So there's all that. It's kind of in the zeitgeist. It's in our consciousness that we are not invincible. We are basically on the planet a tiny time frame, and we are a species at the moment that is top of the food chain, but we won't be in thousands of years. What's going to happen with this podcast? Who knows? Someone might find it.
Well, and I think about too, a lot of like post-apocalyptic narratives have where the earth takes back society, and you always see the vines crawling all over the buildings and everything is falling down, and it's like, what happens to humans in that situation? And it's, I think about, just for me specifically, I live in southern USA, in Tennessee, and it is hot as shit here. Like the last few summers have been almost like you can't spend a lot of time outside. It was 95 degrees just yesterday, like Fahrenheit. I mean, it was hot as fuck. And we were at the pool all day because of like everything else.
Yeah.
So
You can
it's
have some of our rain. We just have incessant rain over here,
oh, we
mostly.
need it. We need some
So
rain.
it's
It's
like
fun.
really, it's localized sort of
Mm.
extremes of weather, isn't it?
Yes, yes, and like tornadoes in states over here specifically where we've not had tornadoes before. And like the poor
Mm.
sharks, they're all on the seashore. They're talking about how they're so hot and they're hungry and they're coming up closer to the shore. We're having more shark attacks. And I'm like, we are literally living in an eco horror, guys. Like, people are
Mm.
finally starting to pay attention. And I'm like, we've been here, honey. We've been here for 20 years and y'all are just now realizing it. Like,
Mm.
it's a problem. So I think a lot of people use horror as an escapism too, to escape the horrors that we're actually experiencing right now,
Yeah.
So that's definitely I think you have that common thread of nature and animals and having kind of a reflective approach. Your writing creates that reflective approach for people, which I think is really cool.
Mm.
So I commend you for that because it does. You think about animal souls and that relationship with nature. So very, very, very cool. So
Thank
how
you. Thank
you're
you.
welcome. I would like to know as far as when you're seeking, when you're setting out to write a story. I know Taxidermist Lover started out as this short story. And then when you is it just kind of do you have inspiration for the story and then go, or do you usually have a few ideas kind of in the back of your mind? Do you kind of keep an idea list, or how do you decide what you're going to really work on next?
I have lots of notebooks and I'm always writing notes, or if I hear a line or I hear something on the radio, or I hear someone say something, or I see a visual that I somehow triggers an idea. I think that's where it comes from. It's like it's quite difficult to reflect back on how ideas start because I don't really plot them. It's more of a feeling and then an idea of what I want the sort of mood of the writing to be, and then sort of the characters and the setting drops in. So with the Taxidermist Lover, I knew I was going to set it on the Somerset Levels because that was a place I knew well, where there were in the UK in southwest England, where it's very flat. It's floods. It's on a floodplain. Basically, it's reclaimed land. There's lots of like these reens, which are sort of deep ditches that separate things, and it does get flooded. And even more now in current history, it's like been more and more flooding, which is impacting humans as well. So as well as the natural environment. So that was something that started as an idea of a love story / horror with hybrid taxidermy and paranormal psychological elements,
Definitely.
and the main character as the narrator. So Scarlett as the narrator. So that started as the line, the first line, and then Mer was more wanting to write the story about the adoption experience, but also in a kind of hyper real, feminine way of how it affects the different women in that relationship. So Mer as the adopted woman, the birth mother, the adoptive mother, the wife of the birth father, and that kind of thing. So how they all kind of are linked but don't know each other, and yet they have a huge impact on each other because of her birth, and then obviously the goblin coming in as a different element without a spoiler. I'm not going to do a spoiler, but
I love it.
yeah.
So
So
intricate.
yeah, so that's how I mashed it together. But it's interesting. Like, so the next one I'm writing it's been festering for a while, and I've got like the bones of it and quite a bit written, but it's sort of, I've got the beginning and the end, and then I sort of fill in the bits, the gaps in between. And there'll probably be like other characters that will become more prominent in it, but I haven't fleshed them out enough yet. And it's also like having the confidence. So it's really great to hear from readers or, you know, people like you who've read the books and enjoy them to reflect back, because it's a solitary experience writing a book.
Absolutely.
You're normally on your own, as you know, and
Yep.
you have to basically go out, otherwise your brain just doesn't work. Well, mine doesn't work. I can't do that. Locking yourself in a room for a month doesn't work.
No. Yeah, no, I would die. I have to have that interaction with people, and that's why I do the podcast. I love people. I love meeting people. And like hearing the behind, like, where did these stories that I love so much come from, you know? So so I have another question for you, and then we're going to get into the lightning round.
Okay.
Now this one's a tough one, okay? If you were going to be blended with an animal, taxidermy style, what animal would you want it to be?
I have thought about this before, and I would like to be a wolf, because I've walked with wolves. That's quite difficult to say. So I had like a birthday present and we walked with them. They were kind of, I think they were slight hybrid, but they were mostly wolf.
Okay.
So they had four leads, because they're so strong. They're so strong, like compared to the strongest dog times 100 or something. They're like incredibly strong, incredibly instinctual. And we walked with them in Cumbria, which is like up in the north of England, in this sort of secret location, because there's still a lot of resistance to wolves being in amongst like farmland, because obviously farmers with livestock, and wolves do what wolves do. So yeah, I would be half wolf and wolf woman. And I don't know which half of me, maybe a blended bit, because I really I just like the idea of having like really sharp teeth. Someone like, I always think a wolf, like, so when we walked with wolves, a wolf knows exactly what it is. It knows where it is within its pack. It knows its kind of its role. It knows how it interacts with the other wolves. It's so wolf. It's so clear about its essence as wolf, and I just think no one fucks with a wolf, do they?
Yeah.
Like, so that's what I want to be blended with.
I love that. You really have put thought into that. That's very cool.
I have.
I feel like I'm so flighty. Mine is like, it changes. I'm like a fox or a squirrel. It would be one of the two.
A hedgehog.
Yeah, right. I'm like, okay, a furry tail. I know I would like, but then again, a raccoon. Like, they all
A swan.
That's No, not a swan, because
Not a swan. A
traumatized me on that. Yeah.
A poodle.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Yeah. See, it's funny though, because I feel like your animals do have that essence. I mean, look at the reaction to when I'm like poodle. Oh gosh, they're so hyper. They're so white, you know, and thinking about how they have that kind of, this is who they are. This is what their spirit is. And then I love that. I think that's so fun. Okay. So are you ready for the lightning round?
Yeah. Ready.
Okay. We're deep dive into the psyche, right? Okay. Would you rather spend a night alone in a haunted mansion or sleep in a graveyard for a week?
Graveyard for a week. I'd rather be outside.
Yeah, be peaceful out there. Yeah, and with no predators, you'd be just fine. So
just dead people.
Yeah. Okay, would you rather be able to see ghosts but not communicate with them, or communicate with ghosts and not be able to see them?
I think I'm all for communication. I'd go for the communication, and then
Okay.
they can describe what they look like.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. And then you can, and it might be a little more comforting because you're just talking to the whatever, you know? You're not having to
Yeah.
like see the gory ghost or Victorian style, because apparently there aren't any ghosts from the 2000s and whatever. So
Oh,
yeah. Would you rather live in a house where objects move on their own, or you hear the same strange noises every night?
well, I already live in a house that has the same strange noises every night, so I'll go for the other one because then
Yeah.
it's just a bit more stimulation.
Have a new experience to add
I
to the
live.
fold.
My house was built in 1840, so when you think about it, there's probably
Oh,
like ghosts or something here.
yes, some
I
spirits
think there were.
attached.
I think a ghost. Yeah, a ghost followed me home once from the prison because we've got an old prison here that's like from the 1600s. Might be before that, actually. No, 1600s. It's one of the oldest prisons, but it's a tourist
Wow.
attraction now. But I
Yeah.
did an art residency there, and then I walked home. I swear something followed me home. I had to do all this cleansing of my. I sound like a nutter now, but I had to cleanse my
No.
house because I
We have
swear an entity followed me home from the prison.
I'm quite woo woo myself, and we have cleansed and saged our own. We have a ghost that lives
Yeah, I'm
upstairs.
woo woo.
Yeah, they've even made an appearance on the podcast before when I had guests. Go watch the episode where I interview a psychic medium, and
Oh,
there is a phone starts ringing, and it's no
oh,
one
okay.
on the podcast, and we were talking about Ghosty. It was crazy. Yeah, it was crazy. So we're at peace right now with Ghosty. Everything is chill,
Like,
but we've had
oh,
some dark times. Yeah,
yeah.
we've had some dark times. Okay, so would you rather be able to walk through walls like a ghost, or levitate objects?
I'd rather levitate objects because that would be so much fun.
How convenient,
I mean,
too, right?
yeah, I think like the
Read it
walking
over to
through
you.
walls, well, yeah. But levitate, you could just get up to so much fun with that, couldn't you? If
Oh,
boring office meeting, things like that.
absolutely. I totally agree. I totally agree. Okay, would you rather be haunted by a ghost of a child or an elderly person?
Ooh, that's tricky, isn't it? I find like these ghost children, like Woman in Black and The
Woo!
Shining and stuff. I just find them so scary. So I'm
Yeah,
gonna go old person because actually like they're underrepresented. So let's go for the
that's very
elderly
true.
person. Yeah, yeah.
That's very true. I like that. And truly, children, ghosts, any kind of children, anything. I'm always like,
And
my husband,
dolls.
yeah, oh yeah, no. And I collected porcelain dolls. I said, well, they were gifted to me, so it became a collection. But I'm like, that would freak the hell out of me now, like it's
I've got a collection of dolls.
oh
But I've selected them and we're friends. So I
oh
see
good.
them as my little pets. So they're
Um,
my little friend.
Mine were selected for me,
They're
and they
freaky
all
though. They're freaky.
they looked like me. So my parents would get me ones that I had blonde curly hair as a little girl, and so I had a whole army of blonde curly hair, and I'm like like little clones everywhere with blue eyes. They all had blue eyes too, and I'm like, this is weird. it just it,
Yeah, it sounds like your parents wanted loads and loads of siblings for you
well, and I
and selected dolls.
two sisters, like of course they're dark hair, and you talk about the family resemblance. They all have dark hair. They're short, petite little Italian people, green eyes, and then there I am. I'm nearly 6 feet tall, blonde hair and blue eyes. So the family ancestry was pretty obvious, but we didn't realize it. It's fine. What gotta tell you, slowest
Oh,
lightning round ever. I'm just awful at it. Okay.
no.
Would you rather encounter a black hole just out of nowhere or a
Hmm.
fearsome creature from deep in the sea?
Oh, I'm gonna go for black hole because I'm so scared of like sea creatures. And also,
And
like, no one really knows what is in the black hole because nothing comes out. So I want to go in there.
yeah,
I'm ready.
just
Yeah.
find out. Like load up. Let's roll. I say that about alien abduction. I'm like,
Yeah.
I like to travel. Take me on. Let's go on an adventure. Like I'm ready,
Just
you know.
as long as it's like pain free and fun, then I'll just go for the black hole because no one really
Yeah,
knows what's in there. They've
just go visit
they've
somewhere
looked
else.
at them, haven't they? There's been no one knows because no one comes out of it.
It's probably so great. They just don't want to leave. That's what it is. They've gone to somewhere way awesome. Like more
Yeah,
awesome.
I'm thinking it's like that. Yeah, they go there and they're like, and maybe time warps to the extent that they think, what's that film with Jodie Foster where she goes in and she thinks it's a split second, but it's actually like years. So
Years.
the whole time
Yeah.
thing warps.
Yes. I love stories
Yeah,
like that too.
like
'Cause
that.
it's so interesting. Yeah. Super fascinating. Especially when they get to, I love
Yeah.
sci-fi and all of the like, paradox of time and dual timelines and whatever. I just think it's all super fascinating. I just love it all. It's I don't understand any of it, but I think it's really cool. Okay. So would you rather face a supernatural entity or a human serial killer?
Ooh. What, and you know who they are? Uh, uh, I'm well. I'm gonna go for human serial killer because I always say, like, if I pick up anyone in the car, I say, "What's the chances of us both being psychopaths?" And then they're like
Right. Oh
this.
no. Oh dear.
So like
I
probability,
think that's hilarious.
Yeah, maybe. Oh, that's a tough one though, isn't it?
It is.
Supernatural.
Because it
It's
could be
like
like a
I'm very
super calm.
interested in other.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the other, like what, like, or different, even like in our species, people are so different, like different cultures. So, or I don't
Yeah.
know, I might
That's
change
tough.
it to supernatural.
Yeah.
I'm going to change it. Yeah,
Okay. That way you can have an experience
yeah,
with the
I'm going to
supernatural
change
and
it.
have
I don't want those
yeah.
humans. Yeah,
Yeah. Humans are dull. We've seen them
yeah.
before. Killers, whatever. Like, let's go for the supernatural entity
Humans are
and take
dull. We know humans are nasty.
yeah, right. Like we already know they're bad. So let's try something else for sure. I love that.
Yeah, we
Well,
know humans are nasty. Let's go for yeah.
so I want every one of our mufflings to know where they can find you, find your work, and keep up with what's going on with you. We know you're on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck it's called these days. Where else can they find you?
I'm on X. So I'm on X as Polly Hall Writer. I'm on Instagram as Polly Hall Writer with little underscores in between Hall and Writer.
Okay.
My website is just my name, pollyhall.co.uk. And yeah, so you can sign up. I send sporadic newsletters and I put stuff on my blog. And that's sort of like up-to-date news of what's happening. And I do like kind of my art stuff as well on there. So, and my books are available everywhere. So like just Google the title Taxidermist Lover or Mer, and you can pick them up wherever you are, I guess, in the world.
Awesome.
And even if you speak Czech or you read Czech, the Taxidermist Lover is translated into Czech. So if you want it in a different language, you can get it
Cool.
non-English. Yeah.
That's fun. That's awesome. I
So
love that.
yeah. and say hi. Like, drop me a message, or if you've watched the podcast and want to say hi or ask me a question, then just drop me a message online, and I'll get
Very
back to
cool.
you.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. It was such an honor to meet you. I cannot wait to go to send the link far and wide and tell everyone I have met the author of Horse Corpse Popsicle, and as we just lovingly will refer to it as forevermore. I cannot
I
wait.
love it.
And
I love that you've
I'll
nicknamed
have to let
it.
you
It's
know
brilliant.
after I read Goblin, because I'm or Mur, but with I call it Goblin in my head. Nothing ever goes by its own
Goblin.
name. So yeah. But it's on. It's in
Excellent.
my TBR. I'm ready for it. So thank you so much for coming on the pod. It was a pleasure
Thank you.
to meet you. And we'll have to do this again. This is super fun.
Absolutely. You'll spur me on to write the next book. So thank you so much.
Do so. I cannot wait to read. I'll be an ARC reader for you. I'll blurb it. I'm ready. Like, let's
Thank
go.
you. Yes.
Yeah, I would love to. Absolutely. That would be like, you talk about fangirl, I would die. I would be so excited.
Okay, you're on the list. I'm putting you on the list.
Yay! Awesome. Well, it's been such a pleasure, Polly. Thank you. Thank you. And I will put your information in the show notes, okay? Next time, Mothlings, we'll
Thank
see you all
you.
next week. Bye-bye. Okay.